Hi, it's that time again. Um, I'm going to do a different kind of blue review today. I'm going to talk about some films that have yet to come on Blu-ray or have recently come out on Blu-ray. All of them are destined for it. So I'm not actually reviewing any actual Blu-rays, just a few movies. And amazingly, it's only a few because what I'm going to talk about is uh, films of 2020 that I've seen. Films that actually legitimately were 2020 releases, though some of them were pushed back a bit from earlier. Um, there's only 9 of them that I've seen. There haven't been a tremendous amount of 2020 releases, and of those, only a small amount have I even been interested in. So I've tried to make it a point to watch those and to uh, make note of them. I use a site called Letterboxd, and I think I've mentioned on here before. I'm not sure, but basically, Letterboxd is a site where you make lists, do reviews, rate movies, but 1 to 5 stars. Um, and you can share the stuff across the site or onto social media platforms. I've done all of the above. I've made many lists on there, and so the list that I make every year, one of them is a best of uh, that year, and that'll update as I see more films from that year going forward, um, and the worst of. So there were not enough to even do a best and worst of uh, 2020 because I've only seen 9 of them, so the list would be like pitiful. And I don't really have much to measure them against since, like I said, I haven't seen a lot of 2020 releases anyway. Anyway, I made this small list, and it's what I ended up with on the year end. It's a very strange um, kind of group of films, and I'm almost not sure where to start, but um, I'll start with a film called Murder, Death, Koreatown. This was a shot on video found footage disaster. Supposed to take place in these people's neighborhood, and they live near some Korean gangs or something. And there's a bunch of murders there, and there's intent to apply the kind of faux snuff sensibility to those grizzly Mexican true crime magazines from days of yore, and it fails. The people narrating are not people I'd want to um, make a movie with, much less investigate a bunch of grisly murders with. Um, they're even more obnoxious than the people in Blair Witch Project, and even more inept. So enough said about that one. I would put that as the number one worst one I've seen this year. The next one I saw was Da 5 Bloods by Spike Lee, and to be honest, I didn't quite finish it. I need to go back and finish it. When Chadwick Boseman tragically passed away, I did make it a point to try to watch it. I was very interested in it, but I didn't get very far into it. I did like it. Um, I did have trouble with the timeline on it, though. You basically have 5 Bloods who served together in Vietnam. Chadwick Boseman being the odd man out in the present day. He's not still alive, so you could probably conclude he died in Vietnam, and we're going to see in flashback how that happened. And you do see flashbacks. I just didn't get deeply into it yet. But you see the other 4 guys in the modern day, and it's really weird because we're talking about, if this is set in the modern day, these guys all got out of the army about 40 years ago or 45 years ago. None of them look as though they're over 60. I mean, a couple of actors might be over 60, but only a little bit. It's almost stretching it to have some of these actors. So Delroy Lindo is one, probably the most well known. I'm not sure how old Mr. Lindo is, but maybe he was old enough to serve in Vietnam. but they don't look very much different. Um, so I don't know. That was kind of a credibility issue for me, but I could have overlooked that if I got deeply immersed into the movie, which I didn't. So I'll give that a twirl sometime. Um, Next one, I saw The Hunt, which I only vaguely remember. It was this kind of political satire, and basically the Republicans and the Democrats both looked horrible in their own different ways, and that's kind of a realistic idea, but the way it was done is all the typical. There's no thinking out of the box on this one. There's not really much thinking. The twist is okay, but I mean, it was whatever 90 minutes that I wasted. So enough said about that. The next one I watched was Invisible Man um, with Elizabeth Moss, and I forgot who played the creepy guy who turns into an Invisible Man. But anyway, the Invisible Man is this kind of crazy stalker. I guess it had potential. Elizabeth Moss is good, pretty good. She's kind of an unconventional looking and acting heroine. To be honest, I forgot who directed this film. I think it is someone who's like a well-known current horror or suspense director, but I can't recall. Um, it was better than that Hollow Man film from several years back, um, but basically not that memorable. It wasn't that it was a bad film. It just wasn't really all that. So I'd probably put that in the medium uh, ratings bracket, the middle ratings bracket. The next one I saw was one called Antebellum, and this was made by some of the producers who worked on Jordan Peele's films. So again, it was going to be a kind of a much like his films, and Sorry to Bother You. It was going to be like a um, modern, well, contemporary um, black genre film, black cast and black issues, and uh, something to say, and but also like suspense and horror perhaps, and violence and genre trappings. So in this case, yes, that is what it is, and very beautifully shot. Not satisfying. I did make it through the whole film, and I was really hoping that it would go places that it didn't. Um, the premise was cool, but um, it was kind of, instead of playing out the premise to its logical conclusions, it just went for your gratuitous um, catharsis for the audience toward the very end. Which, of course, I mean, we all want these redneck slavers to meet a disgusting end. Of course, that's going into a film like that. That's exactly what you want to see is retribution, because this starts off with a lot of torment visited upon the black slaves in that era. It has a science fiction y twist, and there's a present day part of the movie, and it doesn't come until well into the movie. I don't know how I'd feel if I'd watched it in the theater. I did watch it at one sitting. I felt like in this case, rather than just surprising me, like whoa out of nowhere, so we're in another movie, it kind of seemed like predictable. Like, okay, this is what else can happen, because they've played out this original scenario as far as they can go, and they've given you a few clues, but nothing nothing interesting. This isn't Westworld. It's not like constructed in a fascinating uh, structure. So I'd have to say that one's kind of a failure, but noble attempt, I guess. Um, Moving forward, I saw Possessor by Brandon Cronenberg, who's David Cronenberg's son, and as can be expected, it's kind of in the body horror genre too. It has Andrea Riseborough from Mandy Bloom from Mandy, and has done a few other things. I saw her in Black Mirror, an episode of Black Mirror, but she's really incredible, and she's the star. And the premise basically they're using these machines that are hooked up to possess other people and commit murders. There's all kind of black ops kind of stuff. So they're using this technology um, to do these kind of assassinations and things of that nature. And so yeah, she takes control of this one guy's body, and it starts to get a little crazy. There's a lot of blood and violence in this movie, which pleasantly surprised me. I mean, it's unsparing. Um, and Jennifer Jason Leigh appears as you know, a middle-aged female scientist, pretty much kind of like Vendress in Annihilation that she played. Um, but she has a sure and steady, calm delivery as usual, as she did in Annihilation, and I enjoyed her parts, but she wasn't really used very much. The man who played the character that Andrea's character possesses, taking over their body, um, he was okay, you know, and you're trying to sympathize with him, and they're making it really hard though for you to sympathize with any of them because Andrea's character really isn't very sympathetic. And in this guy's body, she does some very questionable things that not only affect that character's life, which was the mission, but also she uses him to take care of some things in her own personal life. And some of that's a little surprising, you know, a twist or two, but I don't know. Ultimately, this one left me dissatisfied overall, but I enjoyed watching it. So far, all the ones I've talked about, that's probably the one that's come the closest to being a decent movie. I'm not doing these in ascending order, by the way, and I'm not really, contrary to what I said, I'm not doing them in the order I first saw them. I'm just kind of saying that to move things along. Uh, Next is one that I'm just going to briefly touch on because I did a full show on it, The New Mutants. That was not a 2020 film, but it's considered a 2020 release because it finally was officially released this year after being delayed several times over the last couple of years. It's my favorite one out of this whole batch that I'm going to talk about. You know, it's not a classic, but I think the Fox X-Men era went out on a good note. I think it was its own animal, an interesting film on its own merits, and you know I think it is a good adaptation, a very well done adaptation. It could have been a little stronger as a film on its own merits, no doubt. There's definitely things that could have been tweaked or intensified or brought out more, but I think for what it was, which is like a little snapshot of the 1980s New Mutants comic books come to life, succeeded incredibly because I was a fan of those comics. So, New Mutants. So the last two movies are of the same studio and the same universe. And I debated over whether to put these two together or not. I put them at the end, the middle. I didn't want to put them at the beginning because I wanted to kind of end things on a kind of a definitive note. I wish it was a definitive good note, but it's not. It's a definitive negative note. And these two movies, the first one is Birds of Prey. I forgot the subtitle, otherwise known as The Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. And the movie's as ponderous as the title implies it's going to be. It's full of itself. It's basically like a very typical Zack Snyder era DCEU, DC Extended Universe film, which means it's a dire proposition just by existing. But not only that, it kind of, you know, it's a follow-up of sorts to Suicide Squad, and so they decided to go ahead and get real edgy, I guess because Joker was such a huge success, or maybe they anticipated Joker might be a success. This film could have been filmed contemporaneously with Joker, but anyway, it's R-rated, so it's the first DCEU set film that's R-rated, and it's the first DC superhero film second ever to be R-rated, if you count Joker as the first. So, of course, they've been doing hard R material on television for a couple of years now, and done it incredibly well with the DC Universe titles, some of which are now on HBO Max. But this one, I'm not a fan of Margot Robbie or Robbie. I haven't liked her in anything I've seen her in. I've seen her in quite a few films. She hasn't ever been, I mean, she has never been really that great. There are movies where she's kind of mediocre, like the Tarzan film. There are movies where she's pointless, a superfluous presence, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I know her character is the key to the plot, but I think they should have just kept her as a plot device because the little bit of attempt to flesh her out, she comes off very poorly. Sharon Tate, the character, and Margot Robbie, the actress, just dreadfully shallow and unimportant. And I'd like to think maybe Sharon Tate's story deserves something a little more than that, even though we know this isn't Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was not any kind of biopic. It's an well, spoiler if you haven't seen it. It's an alternate universe, quasi science fiction film in some ways. Um, so anyway, Margot, yeah, I mean, she was terrible in Suicide Squad. The character Harley Quinn, they changed her so much that she's very unrecognizable from the comic books, original art in the comic books, and the character as designed in the original animated series that she springs from. Um, I feel like there was too much attempt to make her kind of edgy and sexy and emo, kind of mall friendly to the modern day kids, and too much trading on Margot's dubious current status as like a blonde bombshell or whatever. Um, I don't think she's attractive at all in any way. Not one thing about her do I find attractive, physically or otherwise. And the character even more so. She's obnoxious. She brought some energy to Suicide Squad because a lot of it was pretty tepid, but this wasn't as good as Suicide Squad. I mean, it was better made. Yeah, of course, it was more adult and more graphic violence and language. But it was really a slog to get through. Um, it was rough going, and I don't recommend this to anybody. Don't torture yourself. But this started seeing it. I began formulating kind of a theory about the DCEU situation, um, especially in the wake of Joker's success and the success of the adult television live action series. Um, is there room for a DCEU anymore? There's been so many missteps, creatively and critically. Things have not been great for most of these movies, and deservedly so. I mean, the ones that are the most well regarded in that cycle uh, are really, to me, the most overrated. Some of the most overrated films made in recent years. Um, Shazam is fine for what it is. Wonder Woman was fine for what it was. Uh, Beyond that, I really can't cut any more slack to these movies. I think they're just virtually unwatchable to me. And I grew up on comic books and superheroes, so I've tried. I've watched them all, and a couple I've watched more than once. I don't get where they're coming from. I don't like where they're coming from, and we could debate it over is it too dark or whatever. Well, obviously not. If I like Joker and the DC Universe TV shows, it's not a matter of how dark it is. It's a matter of just how lame it is, and these films are very lame. Um, they don't succeed as serious stories like the more adult DC live action work, and they don't succeed as DC Universe wank entertainment like all the animated movies they've been putting out, and they don't really succeed like the Marvel movies as very character centric and quick humor and a bit of energy to the proceedings. Occasionally, some serious moments. Marvel has a pretty good balance for most of their movies. Some are unbalanced, but um, there's not a DC Universe film that I would trade for um, Infinity Watch or Winter Soldier or Black Panther. It just wouldn't happen. And that's not a partisan thing. I love DC superheroes, but it's just a matter of it's a cinematic thing. I think they've gone about this whole thing wrongheadedly from a cinematic point of view, from the writing to the casting to the direction to the visual effects, which are much slacker than Marvel's. Um, yeah, Aquaman. That was one I should have mentioned. That this is the biggest one they've done is Aquaman financially. Aquaman, I can't even say it was great for what it was or good for what it was. It was just bearable. Uh, Yahweh or whatever the guy, the actor I really like, Yahya, um, who's in Watchmen and Black Mirror and several other things. He's good as Black Manta. He's good in everything he's in. But that's about it. Yeah, I didn't. These movies don't. I don't feel anything as I'm watching them, and I don't remember much of anything after they're over. Um, Whereas a lot of my favorite Marvel ones, I kind of want to rewatch. You know, some of them I'm addicted to. Like Thor Ragnarok was like crack to me, but um, I can't say that about any of these DCEU films. Joker is by far the best character from the DC universe film based on a DC universe character, probably ever. But definitely the best of the last, this current era, the kind of post Dark Knight trilogy era. So that brings me to the final movie I watched, and I only saw this for the first time yesterday. Uh, and that's Wonder Woman 1984 or WW84, and it was a lot better than Harley Quinn. It wasn't as tight a film as the first Wonder Woman. It didn't really seem to have much of a focus. It had a ridiculous plot line that was kind of posited on this really kind of really lame childlike view of magic. Which, you know, if that'd been in the Shazam movie, it probably would have worked. Or if it had been written with the cleverness that they tried to bring to Shazam movie and almost succeeded, it would have been fine too, because Wonder Woman had plenty of strange adventures in the 60s and maybe earlier that were kind of cheesy, and, you know, more miraculous things happened, and some of them were imaginary stories and some of them weren't. And, you know, there are a lot of this kind of books that were really fun to young people growing up in that era who were into DC. And they were also comics that people who grew up like Marvel, like me, used to make fun of as being too corny and cheesy. But they have a charm, but you know, and some of the stuff holds up really well from there, especially the Doom Patrol. That's a whole nother ball of wax. But Wonder Woman is one of the characters that could lend herself to that. But this is the problem. It doesn't work. And that's because there's a key element missing. And it's right there in the title of the movie, wonder. There's no wonderment in this movie. I mean, there's no sense of wonder. It seems dreary. You know, it seems like Gal Gadot is like, yeah, okay. I mean, she's the best, probably the best performed character in the DCEU. I don't want to say best cast. I still think she's a little thin on the thin side to be Wonder Woman, and a little on the cynical side as a character to be Wonder Woman. But she stands out among all the other ones, definitely by far. Um, so I'll give her a little credit. And when she's on screen as Wonder Woman, the scenes are really cool. The effects are good. And, Wonder Woman's a pretty dazzling character. She gets her due in that sense in this movie, as she did in the first movie. But just the whole lame magic plotline, which revolves around make a wish, people making wishes, and it just, I don't know. I mean, the writing. I mean, this is not Rod Serling here. You know, this isn't magical realism. This is just lame. And Maxwell Lord is one of the two villains, and you know, some of these powers of making wishes and controlling people's minds were bequeathed to him in the later comic books. And Wonder Woman and him did face off to his demise. But this is kind of, there's not really any context here for this Maxwell Lord. I mean, he acts and looks just like the Kevin Maguire drawn Maxwell Lord from the mid 1980s, from when the movie set, from when Justice League International comics started, which were basically humorous comic books post Crisis that were conceived by Keith Giffen and executed by DeMatteis and Maguire. And Maguire is known for his kind of characters with really elastic facial expressions, very realistic and very humorous at the same time. And this that Maxwell Lord is done perfectly. His hair, his facial expressions. Pedro Pascal plays him. I mean, but really, he didn't seem like a hard character to play. Uh, Once you get over, oh wow, that's Maxwell Lord, then it's like, okay, so what? You know, I mean, they didn't really have any idea of what to do with him. They just took this Wish storyline to its terminal point, and not with some thought as to its ramifications, but a lot of things don't gel, and it's not wonderful and full of wonderment enough for you to suspend disbelief and care. The other villain is the Cheetah, which is one of Wonder Woman's biggest rivals since the 1940s in the comic books, played by Kristen Wiig. And no, I'm not really into her as a performer or comedian or whatever she does. Anyway, um, you know, I don't know. She's mediocre. The more her character becomes, I guess we could say cheetah-like, um, the worse the performance got, and less convincing. She starts out, she's kind of this nerd character, and she does that okay. But the problem is her transformation, her character is so much a plot device that's right out of Batman Returns with Catwoman, because Catwoman was that kind of character in Batman Returns. Selena Kyle was the nebbish kind of, um, bespectacled, brainy girl, and then she, gets messed up and bitter and turns into Catwoman. That had nothing to do with Catwoman's origin in the comic books whatsoever. Um, this one is, a little closer to the comic book origin, but just the way it's pulled off, and the benefits of being in the mid 1980s are only exploited a few times. I mean, they have a giant food court scene in the beginning, and that's like something right out of Stranger Things, or a couple malls right here in my town from that era when I was a kid. Um, so kudos on that. Production design is pretty much in line with the 80s, but it doesn't draw a lot of attention to itself, which is good. Like some of the 80s set material, like certain episodes of Stranger Things, maybe tried a little too hard. Um, because I grew up in the 80s, so, these are shows and movies for people who I don't think even were born in the 1980s. So, you know, um, so there's a nostalgia for what was, but wasn't for them. It's kind of like when I was a kid, young child, there was 50s nostalgia was big for a while. And that was well before I was born. The 50s ended well before I was born. So it was kind of like an era that you could romanticize. And really, the 60s were the same for me, too, when that nostalgia came around. In the 70s, I lived enough in the 70s to kind of remember some of the things and touchstones. 80s are very vivid. They're like yesterday to me. And, this movie really, the only thing they used this 80s setting that had much bearing on the plot was the Ronald Reagan like president and the kind of 2 minutes to midnight like Watchmen like status of the world between the world powers on a nuclear level, which that's how things were back then. That brought up some really bad memories for me of yeah, I did grow up with this kind of fear uh, due to Reagan and his lunacy that almost got everyone killed. And this movie treats it as kind of okay, it's a big threat. It's like the main threat near the end, but I still think it's done for laughs. Kind of, I never take it seriously. Um, like I said, Gal Gadot is pretty good in this part, and she's Diana Prince, her alter ego in a lot of it, um, due to the magic wish uh, plot point. Steve Trevor comes back from the grave, played by Chris Pine. Um, and their romance is nice, and uh, she's pretty good as Diana, and there are some nods to the comic book here and there that are some are subtle and some are not so subtle, but they're definitely fan service kind of things, like the invisible plane and Diana Prince like working for the government kind of and wearing all white, or well, she's working in archaeology actually, not the government, but she seems to have some high level connections. And So those kind of things are cool. If I were obsessed with the Wonder Woman comic books, those and the Cheetah might have been enough for me to go, okay, cool. For those of us who weren't as obsessed with the Wonder Woman comic books, but like the character, it's not really enough to save the movie. I mean, it's cute, it's fun, and it's respectful. But I really think Patty Jenkins, who directed it, her and Jeff Johns co-writing this could have come up with something so much better. And I don't know what tone they were going for. I couldn't tell if it was supposed to be a romance, a comedy, a silly period piece, a magic romp for kids, a dark action movie set on the cusp of the apocalypse. And it doesn't juggle these things very well. It drops all of them and they shatter. So, but yeah, it's okay. It's definitely a lot better than Birds of Prey. I would put it as one of the better DCEU films. Marking all these off my list now. But I do have to say that this is like the nail in the coffin. They need to just pack it up and forget about this. Maybe just do the characters as their own, little self-contained units in movies that are a little bit more interesting and well made, like Marvel did before they got the Marvel Studios thing going and before the Avengers gelled. That's kind of what they were doing for years, and it worked fine. DC has trouble doing that, so I guess the DC Universe approach is the next best thing, but it just seems like too much being jammed down your throat at once. It's better for television where you can kind of pace it and layer it, the long form storytelling. In a movie, I don't know. You just need a little bit more. I don't know. You need more nuance. If you're just going to smash them over the head with bullet points for 2.5 hours, all these characters and all these supposedly dire threats to the universe and everything, and these cheesy one-liners and I don't know. I mean, this to me, I gave up on DC comics a while back, but uh, these movies definitely made me give up on the idea of DC as any legitimate filmmakers. But Joker was brilliant, and it was an adaptation, and I think it was a pretty good adaptation. It took a lot of liberties and a lot of changes, but it also um, it addressed some things that had not been thought through before. I don't think ever were obviously staring us in the face about the Batman mythos. Some uncomfortable things that we needed to grapple with. And in that sense, I thought as a comic book adaptation, it was utterly brilliant. As a movie itself, it was great. I'm not. It was my favorite movie of the 2019. I can't say it's like one of the greatest movies ever made or some of the praise it gets, but I do think it was very good and well done. Well put together. They don't make a sequel. The trailers for the upcoming Batman reboot, which seem to be following in the wake of Joker, maybe not in the same continuity, but tonally, with Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne / Batman, they look good. They look promising. I mean, I'm not going to expect anything, but I think these modern mythologies can be mined for a lot of different things for a lot of years. That's why they're modern mythology. And DC, when they're actually doing that and with some thought, I think they're successful. Like Marvel did with the best entries in the X-Men uh, series by Fox, and they really explored the concept and made you think about some interesting angles while still being somewhat faithful to the characters and the essence of the characters. Um, DC needs to get that approach, or they should just maybe make a movie like Joker once in a while, not try to overwhelm us with all their superheroes and effects live action wise with no infrastructure to support it because it's not there. What is there is kind of collapsing. So I guess it could have gone out on a worse note than Wonder Woman 1984, or as they call it, WW84. But it could have gone on a better note too. So anyway, on that note, a down note, I'm wrapping up this blue review. I'm not going to review any blues, just these films, some of which are already on blue, some of which are coming out on blue. So overall, it was an unfavorable summation on my part regarding films released in 2020. The whopping 9 that I've seen. I came away with, kind of a feeling similar to 2020 itself, just like, what next? What's going to go wrong next? Are we going to get any respite from this, any reprieve? I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so I'll be back soon with some other videos. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Please give me the thumbs up, and I really need all the help I can get with this channel. I'm kind of, an oasis over here. Well, I don't know. For some people, I might be an oasis. For others, I might be somewhere to be exiled, and condemned. But anyway, I need all the help I can get. So anything you do, appreciate it. Thank you.